Hello friends, my name is Kari. This is Tiger Lily Designs. Welcome to week 2, video 2 of the Beanie-A-Long. Are you excited? Today we're going to be learning the cast on and the 2x2 rib. So hopefully you have already watched. Make sure you watch week 2 video 1 first, and that is where we're going to do the magic math. So you can see my little hot pink, all my little notes. And I've got my cheat sheet filled in. Remember all of this is my free PDF, which is available on Patreon, link down below. And you can grab the pattern. We're gonna do the math. We did the math in video 1. So you are all set to go ready to cast on your beanie, the actual beanie. You've got your swatch. Now, what I do wanna say right here is, if you're totally new, I would give yourself some grace. And maybe you want to cast on another swatch to practice the 2x2 rib before you just dive in and cast on whatever your number is to do the beanie. You want to get comfortable with, especially if you struggled or had any kind of learning curve associated with learning the knit stitch. The 2x2 rib is going to be the knit stitch 2, and then we're going to purl 2. Now those are 2 different stitches, and it's just how you place your needles. We're going to learn it, but I just want to give yourself some grace, set yourself up for success. And maybe you want to do a little swatch, a little tester thing. You can pull it out and use it again, but maybe not cast on the total number you need for your hat until you feel comfortable and are happy with your ribbing. Just a recommendation. You do you. You will also probably have to cast on a couple of times. I will tell you, I brought over beanie number 1. This is my first beanie ever. This is Legacy Fiber Arts yarn, one of their gorgeous colors. I forget what it's called. This is my first beanie ever. And I probably cast this bad boy on 6 times, 8 times. All different reasons. I'm going to go over and hopefully save you a time or two with some of my tips and tricks. But it's still, if it's your first time, give yourself grace. It's going to be a hot minute. And then you can see this wasn't a fold over beanie. This was just a, this is still 2x2 rib, but it's not for a folded over beanie. But that's my, so you could do that too. Let's go ahead and talk about that now. This is, if you don't want to fold it over, then your math is just going to be the half, right? So take that in consideration. Depends on where you live. Maybe you live in Florida and you don't need extra ear warmth. Just a thought. You might still do it if you're, who knows? But the moral of the story is just give yourself some grace. Let me find, I slipped a stitch. Lots of things are going to happen. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the camera down and we're going to get started. All right, friends. So I've got all the materials right here in front of us. My cake of yarn ready to go. My swatch just for some pretty. I need some stitch markers. I am going to show you a trick to help you with counting along the way and how I use stitch markers, because counting 108 stitches is a lot. And then I have, these are just fun little things that I grabbed for myself as my special stitch marker. We'll talk about that. I've got my needles right here on them. These are my Likey interchangeables. Everything I'm showing is linked down below in my Amazon shop. But this is the US 6 that I knit my swatch, but with the ribbing, remember, we're going to go down a needle size. So what I do is I do have my 5s ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and give those a quick change real quick. I just wanted to show you how easy it was for these interchangeables. I love them. They're pink, so that's super fun. But they're just screw on and screw off. There is a pin if you needed to tighten them up, but I really don't feel the need to ever use the pin. Just my finger tightening seems to get the job done most of the time. So now I am set up with a US 5 On your ribbing, you're going to want to use 1 needle size down. So if you're using the DK weight like we did our swatch and everything's been recommended, we did a US 6 for the swatch, and that's the body of the hat. But the ribbing, we're going to go down a needle size. You can see it kind of tapers in a little bit. It does that for 2 reasons. One is the ribbing creates a little taper, as well as the needle size. It gives you a nice edge for your ribbing. You're banding around, you definitely just want it to be secure. Again, we talk about the negative ease, and it just adds to that. So what we're going to use is the US 5 needle. Now, what we're going to do first is we're going to review my math. So let's go back. Here we are. Remember, my math worked out to be 108.9. We went ahead and decided that I'm going to do 108. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is cast on 108 stitches. Now, remember, casting on is just like what we did in the first video. And so what you're going to do first is you're going to wrap around you could pull an estimated length of yarn, or if you want to be secure with your yarn, you go ahead and wrap it around 108 times. So there we are right there. Now I'm going to go just pull that right off, pull that little snake right off. And so that's where I'm going to put my slip knot. Remember, so we're going to go back to casting on. So if you need to recall back to the cast on video, just remember there's a playlist down below for this whole Beanie-A-Long knit series. And we're just going to cast on. So remember, use the cast on video to cast on. Before I start casting on, I do want to tell you my trick, because going back and counting and triple counting and quadruple counting 108 stitches on your needles is overwhelming. And so it's easier for me, and my tip and trick that I use just to get myself set up so I don't have to count to 108 10 times, is to put a stitch marker every 10 stitches. That way, it's kind of like what I do with cross stitch, where you kind of cross hatch, and when you're counting over and you got to go 100 over, it's just like that, except with stitches or with knitting, I just use a stitch marker to mark, okay, between each marker is 10 stitches, because 108 is a lot. So that is my tip. I'm going to show you, it's real easy. One of the questions I did get, and I want to go ahead and answer it here, is yes, you do count your slip knot as one of your stitches. Right there, you can see that's my slip knot, and I've knit 3 stitches. So I've got 4, and I started a little tight. See, even I start a little tight. You do count. So yes, your slip knot does count as one of your stitches. So definitely when you're counting to 108, it really didn't matter that much for your swatch, but it definitely does matter when we're talking about your hat. Now you can see, I'm not happy with that stitch right there. See, I didn't pull it and kick it back. So all I'm going to do, because I was talking, I'm going to start back over. Remember that kickback on the cast on. Just take your time. Remember to take your time. Don't cast on too tight. I am definitely unfortunately, I sometimes find myself casting on too tight and then have trouble with the first row for sure. So I'm just going to get to 10 cast on, show you how to place a marker just in case you don't know what that means, and then we'll speed up and we'll come back together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. See, I already put 1 extra on. So let's just triple check before we place our marker. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I have 10 stitches. Remember, 1 is the slip knot and 9 others. So all I'm going to do is you take one of your stitch. So this is, you're going to have to be able to differentiate your 1 stitch marker. So my suggestion to you is maybe use all blue or red in the beginning to count your 10. And then if you don't have a special one like this, use the other color to just mark the one beginning of round. That acronym is BOR, beginning of round. But right now, we're just going to take this step by step. And so what you're going to do is you're going to cast on 10, put a marker. Cast on another 10, put a same color marker. And then till you get to your number of cast on stitches. Remember, mine is 108. So something I want to come back and show you, you can see that when I counted, I had to take one off again. So here we go. I have 21 stitches on my needle so far. Everything is going great. Everything looks good. I'm taking my time and having nice pop stitches here at the bottom. What you wanted to do, why I want to come back to you before you get too far, is to make sure you pay attention. Once you start sliding, right now you're fine. Everything is on one needle. Your cast on length is not any longer than your needles. So everything is straight and good. You didn't even have to work to do that, right? But once you start sliding this around and you're getting closer to the, 60, 70, 80 stitches on the needle, they're going to start traveling down the needle. You have to be aware and take special consideration. You want to not twist your stitches. What does that mean? See right here, my stitches are right here on the inside, and that is where we want them. When this is all done and we're coming back and meeting in the round, I'm gonna put that right there so y'all can see. We want our stitches in the middle all the way around. So as you're casting on, make sure your stitches do not twist around the circumference of the needle. You want them to stay consistently on the inside of the needles. So as you add on and push down, just make sure that you stay straight and keep a non-twisted stitch. Okay, so I'm at a halfway point, give or take. I'm at 51. So I just want you to, I just want to take time and make sure that my stitches are staying nice and straight and not twisted on the inside of my circle. So I hope that is, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections of 10. And I got one just to keep my marker on. So I'm going to keep going until I get to 108. Now we're going to come together, and I have got on 108 cast on stitches. Now I'm going to take the time to spread them all around the circumference of the circular needles. I've got my extra cake and I've got my extra tail. We're not going to bother, just like with the cast on, we're not going to be using the tail yarn anymore. Once we go around a little bit, we can definitely cut off any extra you might have from your tail yarn, but don't do it until you're confident and know that you're not going to have to restart because that could be good yarn. So just make sure when you start knitting, you're knitting with your cake yarn and not your tail yarn, remember? Okay, so I love my little trick about having the markers every 10 spaces. That way I'm not sitting here trying to count 108 cast on stitches. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 groups of 10, and then 8 at the end. Here we are. So we're all set. Now we are ready to start. So we've got our cast on ready to go. I put on my needle stoppers just because I do not want my stitches to slide off while I was chatting and finagling and making sure everything was straight and untwisted. This rainbow yarn makes it real easy to see the stitches on the inside and everything is straight and not twisted. So now what we're going to do is join in the round. So this is different with the swatch. Remember with the swatches, once we've cast on, then we had the tail and we had to wrap around. We are not going to do that because we are going ahead and attaching to the next point. So again, take special note, get your tail yarn, get your tail yarn out of the way and get your cake yarn loaded up in your hands. So remember, this is where we started and this is where we just finished, obviously where the yarn is. So I've got my stoppers on and now what we're going to do is join in the round. And this is tip number 1 of what I'm going to do. It's my favorite tip for joining in the round. So you've got your needles in your right hand and your left hand, right? This is where we started and we went all the way around. So that's what's in our left hand. Here we are loaded up. Right hand, move the cake over here just so it doesn't have to cross over. And we're going to knit 2. But first we have to connect and the biggest hurdle with connecting in the round is trying to avoid a gap between where you connect, where you meet up. Now, this is where we're going to need that special marker. Whether you can tell I used all teal all the way around, and I'm going to grab just a pink one, or I could have used my special cupcake, but we're just going to stick with a pretty pink one to mark my beginning of round, but not yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to slip the stitch over here on this side. Okay? That's what we've got so far. This is my connecting in the round to avoid the loop trick. So that's all we did. We just slipped one off. It's basically, that's the slip knot, right? So we slipped that over. Now we're going to take the stitch closest to the edge without grabbing that tail yarn that wants to play too. Slip it over that stitch and put it back on this needle. Do you see? I can't do it. Unfortunately, I can't do it again. So hopefully you can just go back and watch it again. I slipped it over. It's kind of like the bind off slip over. So now the stitch that was over here, the last stitch I just did, is now on this needle. And that's the beginning of round. So now I'm going to put this marker right here, not grab my tail yarn. And now I'm going to knit 2. The ribbing is knit 2, purl 2. Now, just like when we were doing the swatches, the first row is the hardest because we're digging into the cast on. I can already tell I might have cast on a little too tight. We're just going to work through it. But the first stitch we're going to do is a knit stitch. So just like we did with the swatch. So we're going to knit 2. Just like we know how to do, right? We knit 2. That's it. So here we go. This is where we're going to go around once. So we're going to go all the way around 108 stitches all the way till we get back to the pink marker. That's the beginning of round. That's why that's important. It'll tell us when we did a whole round. Now, so we just knit 2. Remember, the ribbing is knit 2, purl 2. How do we purl? So to purl, now you're going to take your yarn with the tail, it's always in the back. You're going to bring it to the front of your needle. Did you see what I did there? You're going to bring it to the front. And instead of going behind your left needle, you're going to go in front of your left needle and wrap. So it's essentially the opposite of knitting. Your yarn is in the front and you go in the front. Slide in and over. So I just purled 2. Now I'm going to put my yarn back to the back because we're going to knit 2. So as I'm sliding my yarn around the loop, you want to be consistent. This is really, the twisted stitches is only for the first 1 or 2 rows. Once you get yourself set up, they won't twist anymore. But you just want to set yourself up for a not twisted cast on. So now I'm going to knit 2. We feel pretty good about knitting 2, right? Knit 2, stick it in, wrap it around in the back. And then we're going to come to the front and we're going to purl 2. Brought the yarn to the front of the needle, slide in and over. Right needle is in front, wrap in the front, slide in and over. Now we're going to go back to the back. Now we're going to do this a couple times together, and then I'm going to zoom along, the magic of editing, because then I want to show you how to read your stitches. I think it's super important, especially when we are just learning how to do a knit and a purl. Now, this is up to you right here. So I just knit 2. So I'm ready to purl. I just brought my thing to the front. You can keep your stitch markers in to help you keep an accurate count. What that means is I've had a lot of friends who were messaging me, and they would sometimes in their swatch end up, you know, you start with 25 and by the end of it, they've got 29 and they don't know how it happened. I do know a couple ways how it happened. We will talk about that as we go along, but this way you can keep record, kind of keep track that there's only 10 in between. If you want to just keep your markers in there, it will help you keep track of your where you added a stitch if a stitch got added. That way we can decrease it, we can kind of correct for it. Now you can see I'm having a little bit of difficulty, and that is because I cast on a little tight. Trying to do it here on camera and having it so far away from me is a little uncomfortable. So I think that created a little tight of a cast on. But you're just going to knit 2 and then purl 2 and just go around, taking your time. Yeah, I definitely cast on too tight. And it just makes it harder. It's not bad. It won't hurt the hat, but it'll just make it harder for me to start. Okay, I just purled. So, because I just read my stitches, but I'm going to teach y'all how to do that once we get around one more time. So knit 2, purl 2. And it's going to be awkward in the beginning, 100%. Like I said, I probably cast on and or started my first hat 6 or 7 times. And so give yourself grace to not only cast on 108 stitches straight, but then to learn a new purl stitch. So again, I'm still being very considerate and cognizant of keeping everything not twisted as I'm scooting it around. Just make sure when you're scooting, don't accidentally scoot it off the needles. Then you got to figure out how to pick them up. And hopefully to pick them up, you can see them and just go and pick them up. Oh my goodness, I'm so tight. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward, and we're going to come around when I get back to my beginning of round, and we're going to learn how to read again. So I have made it all the way around the beanie once, doing knit 2, purl 2. And I was able to deal with my super tight cast on. So this next round should be a little less painful, a little less pain to get in and out. And I'm going to show you how to read your stitches. So that way, when you do have to leave your knitting and come back and pick back up again, you know whether you're at a knit 2 or purl 2 by reading your knitting. So, because right now you may look at this and be like, they all look the same to me, but they don't. They have a little bit of difference, and that's what I want to show you how to be able to read. So remember, I'm going to just beginning of round, and because we divided by 4, my last 2 stitches were purls, and my first 2 are knits. Always, every time. So now we're going to go on and go around again. So I just knit the 1 so that I didn't lose my marker, my beginning of round marker. And I'm going to knit again. Oh, so much better. The first one is always the hardest. It gets easier actually as your fabric starts to grow a little bit. With every row, you'll be like, oh, this is getting easier. It's getting easier, A, because you're getting better, and B, because the stitches are stretching. Well, they're not really stretching, but they're just growing enough, and it's not so pulled taut. So let me just, you can see the difference, or you can see that there's 2 kinds of stitches. Maybe you can't see the difference, but we're going to talk about the difference. There's 2 kinds of stitches. A knit, and see this little, it's called a purl bump, but it looks like a little knot. It's where the yarn goes around on this side. So those are purl stitches. Knit stitches, purl stitches. Can you see the difference between the 2? Purl bumps and knits. You can almost see the little knit loop right there. And the bump is like the back side. Because remember, it's kind of opposite. So hopefully that helps you to be able to read your knitting. So that way, when you come back, because this is now going to take you a hot minute. So week 2, what you need to do is you're going to knit 2, purl 2 for the length of your ribbing. So we did this in the math. We called it section A. It's called rib length. Mine measures 4.5 inches. So let me just slide this marker before I put my needles catchers on, my stitch savers. Okay, so remember, I'm going to knit, this is what we're doing right now, I'm going to knit for 4.5 inches. Knit 2, purl 2, round and round we go. So that's week 2, friends. And so eventually your fabric will start growing, and you'll be able to see, you can see it's, the fabric looks like that on one side, and it looks like the opposite on the other side. Right? So once you go around and around a little bit, you'll be able to start really seeing your knit and purl ribbing. So as always, reach out to me on Patreon, on Instagram with any questions, and I will see you during the week 2 live Q&A.